Okay, welcome everyone to our first eRequesting TDG for the year. How time flies. Um, so let's start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather today. We pay our respects to our elders past, present, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. So the agenda for today, we voted at the end of last year whether to hold this meeting or not, because we're sort of in publication mode at the moment. The main reason for today is to address any change requests that have come up. This is our last opportunity to address those. So we'll go through our usual business. I'll give an update on where we are with the ballot for working standard. We'll go through a couple of change requests. We just have a couple of small ones there to go through. Then got an opportunity to just do a walkthrough of the IG. Now, this can be as long or as short as we want to do it. I'll basically be led by those on the call about anything you want to talk about in more detail. Otherwise, it'll be a reasonably quick run through of what we've got in the IG ready for publication. And then just a quick conversation about R2. We'll set up a Confluence page for people to nominate items that they might like to see in R2. So we'll just quickly have a look at that page and show you where to go if you want to add that information. So jumping into the usual business. These are the meeting minutes from the last meeting of last year. Now, I haven't distributed these, so no one has likely reviewed it. So we won't vote on this today. We'll roll this over to the next meeting, but I'll put it in the chat so you can have a look. I will send the link to this one out with the minutes from today's meeting so you can have a look at them both and then we can vote on those to accept them in the next meeting. But the minutes are complete, all the information's here, but just have a look, and if there's any omissions or anything wrong in there, you can add a comment or update the page yourself. So we won't vote on that. We will roll that over to the next meeting. For other updates, there is a Spark CDG and AE Core Technical Design Group Community Co-Design Workshops being held in Hobart in February. So that's on the 25th and 26th of February. So the day one is, I think the first half of day one is Clinical Design Group. The second half is Clinical Design Group and TDG co-workshop. So having both together, looking at things like encounter record. And then the day two is an AE Core Technical Design Group meeting, which is also looking at the requirements for encounter record. So if you're interested in attending that and haven't already got a ticket, you can follow that QR code there to request a ticket. I think there's still tickets available. There's definitely tickets available for the Technical Design Group Day. I think there may still be a couple, but either way, register there. You can always go on the wait list if they're currently sold out. Update for ballot for working standards. So none of this has changed since the end of last year. We're still at 100%, which is great. We're actually over 100%. We've resolved more issues than were just raised through ballot. They've all been applied. So the next one is probably the more important one. So we're now in that last phase there, publication phase. So we've gone through all the ballot reconciliation. And the ballot votes are still changing slightly. So people are removing their negative votes, withdrawing their negative votes, which turns them into affirmative. So of our 59 that were eligible, we've now got 38 that are affirmative, only 7 negative. And so that gives us our approval status with 84% pass. So we're very much in the green now after having a red X here for so long. This is pretty nice having us well and truly in the affirmative pass for our ballot. Just again, a bit of an update of what we're doing now. So we're in that sort of the final stages of the ballot publication process. So we're just completing the change. We have completed most of the changes, really just doing QA reviews now, making sure everything's right. We'll prepare a release branch, which we will go through with the TDG in the next meeting. And then we, as part of the TDG, will look to accept that for publication. It'll then go to the FIRE work group for endorsement as well, and then we'll get published. So what that looks like in our next couple of meetings. This first one is today. So today is our last opportunity for any change requests for the publication release. So if anyone is on the call who's got anything they want to raise that thinks urgently needs to be fixed, today is the day to raise that because it's our last opportunity. When we come back in 2 weeks' time to this meeting, we will have a publication branch ready to go. We're going to review the QA report, we're going to review the variation statement, and then essentially vote to accept it for publication. And then that will go to the FIRE work group meeting on the 11th of February for their approval to publish eRequesting, and then we will publish after that. So, like I said, today is the last opportunity for any changes that we need to push through. And then there's at the end that's the Hobart CDG and TDG dates there as well. So change requests, like we just said, today is our last chance to put any changes in. There's a couple, as we've been doing QA reviews, a couple of little things have popped up. So they're the two we're going to go through now. When we get through these, if anyone else has any other issues that they know of, or as we do the walkthrough, if we find anything glaring that we need to fix, yeah, today's the day to do it. I might jump straight into the first issue here that's been raised. And I'll put this in the chat. Make it a bit bigger. Hopefully that helps. So there was a FIRE work group meeting yesterday. And in that work group meeting, there was some discussion about a code system, which was the communication request reason code system. It was something we were originally using in eRequesting, but then we transitioned away from it. So it was being deprecated in AU base through the FIRE work group. And we also have some value sets that we are no longer using in eRequesting that we are deprecating as well. So there was a discussion in the FIRE work group about the deprecation of those items, and it didn't seem to make a lot of sense that we deprecate things that have never been in a published release. So FIRE work group yesterday made the decision that they would remove that code system rather than deprecate it, given it hadn't been published before. And so we're looking now to apply that same pattern for us, where we have a couple of value sets. One of them uses that code system. There's another value set that we have that we were deprecating, but we're going to release one now. So to have something deprecated in release one doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So just going through this, that what I've discussed, the FIRE work group meeting, which was yesterday, agreed to remove the deprecated communication request reason code system from AU base, as it was never included in release and has been repurposed by the communication request category code system. It was agreed to remove rather than deprecate artifacts that have not previously been released as a convention moving forward for HL7 AUIGs. The following unreleased value sets are in eRequesting can be removed before release one. So that's the requested change. We have a look at these. Whoop. You'll see as these are currently in the continuous integration build of the eRequesting IG, we have this patient category value set. You'll notice here that the standard status is deprecated. This has in here reminder and instruction. It was being used in one of our communication request profiles, but we have repurposed that now. So I'll actually show you in our communication request, we have on category, we now have a new value set, which is the communication request category. Have a look at that. It has in it urgent results, patient preference, or copy to reports. So what we're doing is we're using the category now to essentially determine which type of communication request we're using, whether it's a copy to communication request, which is, or a patient communication request, or an urgent provider communication request. We're now using category to determine which of these we are using. I think we now have a table that's in our communication request, which talks about the differences between our different profiles. For example, here we've got category, copy to reports, patient is patient preference, and communication request is urgent provider. So we had other things previously in that category, which is what these value sets were tied to. So previously we had things like reminder and instruction, which was the one jumping around a bit. We had reminder instruction. So this value set is no longer used. It's not used by anything in eRequesting IG anymore. Because we hadn't explicitly made a decision on it previously, we just marked it as deprecated. But based on the discussions that were in the Firework group, that we should remove it because again, we're publishing release 1. So it doesn't make sense to have something deprecated in it. The other one was the communication request reason. And you'll see here, this one, well, it can't actually, the code's no longer here because the code system has been deprecated in AU-base. But this was what we were using. We were using communication request reason instead of communication request category. So all we've done is moved those values we're using against reason against category. We no longer need the reason value set. As you can see, there's nothing in it. So it's just been marked as deprecated. So this change is to look at removing them rather than marking them as deprecated because they're no longer used in eRequesting IG. So I went through a lot there, jumped all over the place. Does that make enough sense to anyone? Does anyone have any questions on change there? I'm the chair, so I can't make a motion, but is anyone else interested in making a motion to accept this change?
I'm happy to move, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Do you have a second from anyone?
This is Chris. I will second that.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions before I launch a poll? I will launch a poll to vote for the current motion on the screen. About 50% of people voted, so if we can get that number up a bit, be good. It's pretty good now. So I'll end that in 3, 2, 1, and poll. Share the results. So we've got 14 plus 1 in the chat, so 15 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. Okay, thank you. I'll jump to the next change. So this next change is actually a technical correction. It's something that the co-chairs can actually resolve a technical correction themselves. But there is a point in it that I thought it would be useful to bring to the TDG, and we might vote on it in the TDG as a change request rather than technical correction if we agree. So I'll bring that one up. Put this one in the chat too. Okay, in the chat. Okay. So we had a previous issue that was raised through ballot, and I'll just open that one up here. This issue was on our clinical context document reference profile, that we should add the document reference date and author. So we agreed to do that. We're going to add them as must support elements, and we added default obligations, and we didn't change any cardinalities on that. So again, I'll show you what that looks like. Under our profiles, we have a AU eRequesting clinical context document reference. In that, we have added the date and author. We've added must supports on them. We've added obligations on them. And this particular change request or technical correction is that we agreed to add it. We also, what you'll notice is on this at the moment, author can reference a practitioner role, an organization, a device, a patient related person. Now, we've just left that completely open. We haven't constrained it, just taken it as it is defined in the document reference profile. But what we've done for all of our other references is where there is an eRequesting or an AU core profile that we reference that instead. You can see here above subject, we reference AU eRequesting patient rather than just patient. So we actually had another change request as part of ballot, which was introducing some eRequesting profiles. We introduced patient practitioner, eRequesting patient practitioner role and organization. So we have eRequesting profiles for all of those now. So what this change is about is changing the reference target of the document reference author to the eRequesting patient, eRequesting practitioner, eRequesting practitioner role, and organization profiles. Now, we could do that as a technical correction because that's just something that was missed. We already had a change request to go and update all those references anyway. But the other bit in here is consider if a change request for a related person to be changed to an AU core related person, as in other profiles. So that's the approach we've taken with others. If there's an eRequesting profile, we reference that. If there's an AU core profile, we reference that secondary if there is no eRequesting one. So in this case, there's an eRequesting practitioner profile, so we will reference that. There is a eRequesting practitioner role, so we can use that. There is an eRequesting organization, so we can use that. There is no eRequesting device. There is no AU core device, so we would just leave that as is. Patient, there's an eRequesting patient, so we can reference that. Related person, there is no eRequesting related person profile, but there is an AU core profile. So this is the pattern we've applied elsewhere in the IG. It's just something that we found as part of QA that we had missed. So the proposal here is to update all of these to the equivalent AU eRequesting or AU core profile, including that AU core related person. Are we happy with that? Does anyone have any questions on that change? Are we happy to just follow that pattern we followed before? No issues with that? Well, that's the case. Is someone interested in making a motion for that? No one?
Yeah, I'll motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Michael. Any questions before I launch that? Just clarifying that we're going to do all the AU eRequesting profiles and the AU core related person profile. I'll launch poll again. Can't find it. Okay, hopefully you can see the poll now. Got about 60% of people voted. Get that up a little bit. All right, looks about where we were before. So I'll end that in 3, 2, 1. So we have 12 plus 1 in the chat, 13 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you. Okay, so they're the only 2 change requests that had come up as part of our QA review. There's a few other technical corrections that the co-chairs will deal with. But other than that, I think we're looking pretty good for publication, but I'll certainly open the floor here. If anyone else knows of any changes that we need to get in last minute before we publish, we're going to do a bit of a walkthrough now too. So if there's anything that jumps out, we can discuss that. But I don't know if anyone was sitting on anything or had any burning issue that they wanted to bring up. We can do that now, or we can just go through the walkthrough, and if anything pops out at us, we can look at addressing that then. All right. I'm not hearing anything, so we'll move to an IG walkthrough. So again, if I'm not getting any feedback or any questions or any of this, I'm going to go through this reasonably quickly. The primary purpose of this meeting today was just to make sure that we had a placeholder to deal with any change requests. We've dealt those. But please, as we go through this, ask questions. If you'd like to know more detail, let's deep dive on any of those things. This is up to you, what we make of this time now in this meeting. So we'll go through it, but please raise your hand, speak up, and we can talk about anything that you've got an interest in as we go through it. So we're going to go through the current build. So it's the continuous integration build. We're continually putting the sort of little tweaks and changes into this as we go. What this will turn into in the next week will be the release branch. And then that'll be the final one that gets released as release 1. So, but this has all the changes up to now in it. So we'll launch into that. I'll put it in the chat so you can follow along at home. Hopefully that's big enough. I might zoom it in a bit. So I'm not going to go through all the text. I'm not going to go through all the detail. I'm just going to basically walk through what's in the IG, how it's laid out, what some of the changes are and the like. So we have a pretty standard now sort of introductory page, which just talks about the what the IG is, about the background, and then we have here the scope of release 1. So this clarifies for anyone coming and looking at this what we were trying to achieve through release 1, particularly what our focus was and things that we had considered were out of scope. So that's there and defined on the front page. We have here a list of dependencies. So if you're loading this package, you'll see at the top here is our implementation guide, and it has dependencies on HL7 terminology, which version. These versions will all get fixed. You'll see some of these say current on them. As we go into when we go into the publication branch, they will be the specific versions, which will be the latest release of AU Base, the latest release of AU Core. So there is a hierarchy of publication that we do here. With our HL7 fire IGs, we publish AU Base first, then we'll publish AU Core, and then we do the downstream ones like eRequesting after that. So the dependencies, we can reference the latest releases. So I think it's R6 for base, it'll be R2 for core. And then you'll see here, because we're referencing AU Core references Smart App Launch. It has dependency on Smart App Launch. The IPA, which is referenced both by eRequesting and by AU Core. Oh, that's IPA. This one's International Patient Summary. And then fire tooling and the like. So that gives you all the dependencies there, and they're described further on. And then at the bottom of this is how to read the guide. Gives you essentially a table of contents, talks about where everything is in this IG and what it is. And then just some collaboration at the bottom. So that's the home page. We did used to have in here some sort of context information about eRequesting and some interaction diagrams. You'll actually notice that they have now moved into the guidance page. So I might just jump into that one because that's the next probably best place. You'll see under guidance, we've got general guidance, we've got workflow guidance, sex and gender, the data for interoperability, relationship to other specs, our variant statement, and the future of eRequesting. So general guidance is, like it says, general, but this is where some of that stuff from the home page has now been moved. So we've got our RESTful interactions, which talk about our eRequesting actors, what they are, and how they interact with a example interaction flow of how the placer, the server, the filler, and the patient actors interact. And then this is our profile relationship diagrams. So this used to be on the profiles page, but it's now moved into general guidance. And this kind of gives you that idea of the relationship between the profiles. So the blue profiles here, our eRequesting profiles, the ones with the dotted line are the abstract profiles that we've created. We've got orange ones, which are external profiles, and then the element references to another resource. So as an example here, we've got the eRequesting diagnostic request profile, which is an abstract profile. So we don't expect implementers to implement that profile, but it is used so that the imaging request and pathology request profiles derive from that, inherit from that. And then we've got relationships to encounter, coverage, patient, practitioner role, and then here's our workflow being managed by task. Once again, task has a abstract. Actually, I will click on this because what we can do now is you can click on this, it'll give you a zoomed in one because I'm 100% gives you the full diagram and demonstrates those relationships. So this gives you a bit of context of coming into this and going, oh, what references what, rather than having to go through all the detail in each profile. It gives you a bit of a summary of that. There is also one for communication request, which again, we've got an abstract communication request profile, and then we've got our specific urgent provider, copy to, and patient profiles, the relationships task as a focus on one of these. We have our recipient, we have the requester, the sender, the subject, and about. So all that's described in there. This isn't complete.
Can you just go back to the previous one?
Yeah, sure. This one here?
Yeah, I was just looking at the requester as a practitioner role, and it's linking to. So these are only. So this is the relationship between profiles, not the actual use of the profiles.
Yes, correct. Yes, it's only the profile references. Yes.
Yeah.
So which profiles we've set up in it, and just again, that's probably a good question to show how that. So see here, we've got on this profile here, which is a document reference. We've got subject references a requesting patient. So what this diagram is just demonstrating that the subject references the requesting patient. So you can sort of understand how these profiles relate to each other.
It might be confusing for some where in that diagram, the requester and the owner seem to be related. As in the requester.
Yeah, because it's not necessary. Yes, I get that. So I think what Andy's saying here is because this is profile relationships, the requester references a practitioner role which belongs to an organization, right? But the owner of the task is not necessarily the same organization. So, well, it's unlikely to be the same organization. So, yes, it does describe that, but I can see that may confuse people. But it is in the description here that this talks about profile relationships. So, but it could be misinterpreted, definitely. We've then got a section on our diagnostic request grouping, talks about how request groups work. Talking about, we have our task group, requesting task group. So this is a similar sort of diagram, and the diagnostic request task is part of the task group, and the communication request, if there is one. There may be multiple of these. And then we have our imaging pathology request or our communication request. Reference from those groups. There's descriptions in here about how the group works, guidance on grouping, how to use it all. So there's a lot of detail in here about how to implement these things. And then at the bottom, we have implementation considerations. So these are just sort of things to think about when you're implementing eRequesting. These are things that have been discussed at some point in the TDG, but we haven't come to a decision to say authoritatively, this is how you must do it. So these are just some sort of general considerations to think about and work out in the ecosystems that you're going to implement eRequesting, what approach you're going to take. And these sorts of things are things that R2 may expand on and start to become more prescriptive about how this works. But for release 1, we didn't go into that level of detail. So that's the general guidance. We then have a detailed page on workflow guidance. So there's a lot of stuff in here, but this talks about our state machine, about how the eRequesting tasks move through their states. We've got this talks about the state and its allowed transitions, what's meant by that when it moves through these. We've got the relationships between the task status and the status reason and the business status. Talking about here, for example, that the business status might be service booked and the task status is accepted. And then when the specimen's collected, it would move to in progress, for example. So this is just guidance. None of this is enforced through the IG, but it's again, things we've discussed in the TDG, how we expect these things to work. So when you come in and have a read of this, understanding what the intentions were. Another discussion about diagnostic request statuses and relationships between all these different types of status. So all of this sort of refines what's in the international HL7 guidance around this, been tailored for our specific use cases. But it doesn't, none of this is sort of invented. We've just derived it from international and tailored it for what we're doing in eRequesting. Sex and gender page. This is in all of the current IGs. It's in AU base, it's in AU core. This talks about the sex and gender concepts, provides some guidance on where it is supported, where it's been localized and where it's not applicable. So for us in eRequesting, for example, in the diagnostic request, we support the sex parameter of clinical use, as well as our imaging request and pathology request. In our eRequesting patient, we support administrative gender, name to use, pronouns, and gender identity. And then the eRequesting practitioner and related person have some others that are not localized. They're just there, as well as some localized concepts. So it describes what each of these sex and gender concepts are. This is all derived from AU base. We've copied it into here. We do have then some guidance on the sex parameter of clinical use that we're using. And we've got the STU note that came from the CDG, and then some descriptions about how to use it within eRequesting. The eRequesting data for interoperability mappings. So we've got a table here that describes each of the eRequesting data for interoperability data groups. So these are the ones defined by the CDG. So example, they've defined a service request and the data element they've defined is service name. So we've used that in AU eRequesting diagnostic request, and where the element that we've mapped it to is service request code. So this gives you the mapping from the CDG data for interoperability elements to our FIRE elements in profiles. So if you're working backwards or forwards, you can work out where they came from and where the CDG had defined them. So they're there for all of the CDG concepts in there. There are some, like, for example, implanted medical device. We're expecting it to map to device and device type status, though that seems a pretty straightforward map, but we haven't implemented that in eRequesting. So this data group is a future candidate requirement under consideration. Future versions of eRequesting will develop tests, so that's not part of release 1. So there are comments along those lines as well. Some of these map to AU core things. So the adverse reaction risk summary, again, would map to an AU core. Allergy intolerance, it's not something we're using in eRequesting yet, but it's here so we know when we want to use it, how it's mapped. Relationships to other specifications. This is our layer diagram, which talks about, we have the international spec, and we have AU base, which defines Australian realm definitions, and then we have our common AU core, and then a use case specific IG like eRequesting. So this is just general sort of relationships that's in all of our IGs. We've got relationships here between the different IGs, including IPS, gender harmony, AUCDI, so, and some references over here. So that's a pretty general page that's in all our specs. Variant statement. This is something we will review one more time just before we do publication. It's a requirement for HL7 Australia that we have a variant statement in the IG. So we will review this properly next meeting and accept it. We have already reviewed it in the past, but we'll just make sure it's complete. So here, the Australian published FIRE implementation guides are required to follow specific published requirements. They should use AE core profiles, should use AE base profiles, and extensions shall include a variant statement. So what we're saying here is that we have no variants from AE base, so we're fully compliant, but we have implemented additional profiles that are not profiled in AE base. So communication request, consent, document reference, task, and then we have some extensions as well. And it goes the same for AE core. So we don't have any variants. We haven't changed anything from AE core, but we have done some additional things. And again, same things: communication request, consent, coverage, document reference, service request, task, and extension. So we've done more. These things didn't exist in AE base or AE core, so we've just added to them, and that's being noted here in this variant statement. Future eRequesting. This page is actually going through an update at the moment because currently we've got our development timeline here, which we are nearly complete. Here we are, January 2026. So we will be publishing in February. So this diagram is no longer needed. Maturing the baseline talks about the different Australian FIRE maturity model levels and how things move through there. So that's probably stay. And we're just making an update here to future candidate requirements. This has a link to deferred items. It has these eRequesting data interoperability items that we've currently not implemented. I think we're just updating some wording on that. That'll update shortly as well. So that's all the general guidance. I'll jump back to conformance. This was predominantly derived from sort of AE core. We've changed a few little things in here, but we haven't focused a lot on conformance for release 1. But basically what we're saying here is that eRequesting actors shall implement, must support elements in accordance with the obligations. and implement the required REST API interactions defined on their respective capability statement. Then we've got some other things in here that talk about the requirements for profiles and capability statements and declaring conformance, mandatory elements. So this is the main part here about the must support and obligations. We've created some obligations for our actors. For example, the eRequesting placer shall populate. Populate if known, if it's the cardinality is 0 or more. Shall populate if cardinality is 1 or more. And then the server. So we describe each of these obligations for our specific eRequesting actors. Talks about how to read the must support and obligations, and what that looks like in the structure definition. That's all about how conformance is defined. Use cases. These use cases were defined very early on in eRequesting from 2 years ago, at least 2 years ago now. So what we've described here is, I think we've updated some wording here. So these use cases describe the target state for eRequesting with an initial focus on pathology and medical imaging request community-based care, and may be delivered over multiple releases of the implementation guide and will be expanded and refined over time as the implementation guide evolves. So these were the original use cases. Like we said, we'd expect these to evolve and change over time. It's a reference for what was discussed in release 1. We haven't done all of this or covered it explicitly, but it is the reference. And moving forward in R2, that's an opportunity to have a look at these use cases and see what changes we might want to make there. Security and privacy, we've been not stating anything much about security and privacy other than you need to be aware that security and privacy is important. It wasn't a focus for release 1. So we don't include any specific security and privacy requirements. We're just focused on establishing the foundation data model and RESTful API interactions. Specific security and privacy requirements may be developed in future releases. But we do point you to the general requirements in AE core, which again, they're not use case specific, but things about using TLS and abiding by the Australian Cybersecurity Centre guidelines for TLS and the like, and should conform to the FHIR communication security requirements and should support smart app launch. But again, eRequesting release 1 wasn't focused on that. I think again, moving into future releases, sorry, jumping around. Moving into future releases, this is definitely something that would be I'd expect to expand and talk about the requirements needed within an ecosystem for eRequesting. Then we've got the FHIR artifacts. So this is where we've spent most of our time. There is an artifact summary, which has everything that is referenced in some way out of this IG. So it's a big list. We've got actors, capability statements, abstract profiles, resource profiles, extensions, value sets, examples. So this is the full list of everything. So you can jump into that and see, find what you might want to need. Otherwise, they are broken out into, we've got profiles and extensions, terminology, actors and capabilities as their own pages as well. So profiles and extension page, which is where I've spent most of the time. We have all of the profiles that we've defined in requesting, our communication request abstract profile, our more specific profiles through each of these that we've defined. Also noting other profiles used. So these are ones we haven't defined, but they are referenced in some way from our IG, including these AU core ones and the IPS one. And then we have extensions that we've used, the display sequence, fasting precondition, Indigenous status, and the like. So as far as the profile changes and that go for this release, that's where the changelog comes in handy, especially if you were looking at this from a previous release. In our changelog, we've got this release will change to release 1 in our publication branch. and then we'll have these changed in this version. So every single normative change that we have made in this IG is in this list with what has changed. And it also has a link to the JIRA that was used to make that decision, which includes the vote, which TDG meeting it was, what the resolution was, and the like. So the full list of everything that's come into this release is there. You'll see this was our ballot release. So that's the one we went to ballot with, release, what had changed in that going to ballot. So if you've only looked at the ballot version, you can now go through here and say, oh, what changed since then, which there is a lot, as you'll see. That's what we've been doing over the last 6 months, going through all those ballot resolutions. And this goes right back to, I think that is the first one. So the ballot release of the first lot of change log. So if you're wondering why something changed, how it changed, this is the place to go. You'll find everything you need to know there. I wasn't going to go through the profiles themselves, but I'm happy if there's anyone would like to have a look at or discuss in any detail. They have all been gone through in meetings, but it might have been a while since we've discussed any of these. So happy to dig into any of these and talk more about them. If anyone's got a particular interest or going, what's that? I don't remember anything about that. But just noting that we've now got our eRequesting profiles in here. They were previously AU core. So here we've got our eRequesting organization, our eRequesting patient, eRequesting practitioner, practitioner role. These were brought in purely as obligation only profiles. So what we've done, if you look at the differential table from AU core, nothing has changed. We haven't changed must supports. We haven't changed constraints. We haven't changed anything. All we've done is added these obligations over here, which is easier in this view, about the AU, I think there's still a view problem with this. I thought it was fixed. It doesn't appear to be. It's showing the AU core obligations and the eRequesting. This is a tooling problem at the moment, where it's showing those. I wonder if snapshot shows me better. No, I thought it was fixed, but it doesn't appear to be. But it basically adds our obligations in here for eRequesting actors, like the eRequesting placer has a populate if known obligation. But otherwise, everything else in these are the same. The key reason for bringing those in was that in future releases, we might want to change some of the constraints. So we might want to say that identifier is no longer optional, it's mandatory, and you must provide one of these identifiers and the like. So now with the profiles in the eRequesting IG, we can move forward and make those changes that are specific to the eRequesting use cases. But for the moment, they're just in there, that they're the same as AU core. I will pick out document reference. This was one that we pained over for a long time in the TDG about what type of profile this was going to be, because let's find the definition of it here. Okay, clinical context is unformatted text narrative representing the broader clinical background or circumstances related to a request, not general comments or news. So this is clinical notes, essentially. And we needed a way to represent that. We looked at a number of different options. None of them are ideal. We kind of settled on document reference. But it is a little bit more complex, noting that it's set up for an attachment, but the way we've said it's going to work is that the attachment has to be text plain. We're not accepting PDFs, we're not accepting Word documents, we're not accepting anything else, just plain text. And it is embedded in line. So it's not referenced to another document sitting somewhere else on another server. It is embedded in this resource as base 64. So what that does, it gives us the ability to reference these notes from everything in a group, so that we only have the note once. It's not duplicated between items. But that was one we spent a lot of time working through, but it is all in here now. And I think you'll find in the service request, diagnostic request, a lot of the guidance is here in this abstract profile about how to use these different things. It gives you references out to the workflow guidance, the grouping guidance, talks about here resources referenced by supporting info can be referenced by all service requests in the group or by individual requests. That includes the pregnancy status and clinical context, which is that text narrative that we just talked about. And then the use of service request note is general comments, as opposed to the clinical context, which is that clinical background. So we've got all this guidance in here. When you're going to implement, there's a lot in here to read and work through, but we have captured all the stuff that we've worked through in this TDG over the last couple of years. Sorry, jumping to new pages. I'll go back to it. Are there any profiles anyone wants to have a look at while we're here? Otherwise, I'll leave it to you to look through.
Did you want to show the capability statements where it's got the must support guides?
Yep, that's where I'll jump to that now. Might as well. Okay, so on our actors and capabilities, we have an actor definition for our placer, filler, patient, and server. And then we have a capability statement for each of those. So let's jump into the server one, for example. Basically, this describes the capabilities for a system that implements eRequesting, in this case, a server. It talks here about the must support references to profiles. So these are all the profiles that you would need to support if you were to implement an eRequesting server, and the profiles that you would need to support implementing that. It talks about here the formats you're expected to be using. For example, shall support JSON, should support XML. It then talks about the RESTful capabilities, saying that the eRequesting server shall support all resources required for the exchange of diagnostic requests as defined in this capability statement, implement the RESTful behavior. So in here, you will see, should support transactions. You'll see here, these are these RESTful transactions about read, search, update, create, and talks through each of the resource types, the supported profiles, and what interactions you're expected to support read, search, update, and create, searching up by ID. You'll see some others down here where we've got include searches and rev include searches, these search parameters, and then goes down into the detail to each of these. So on the communication request, the supported profiles are copy to patient, urgent, provider. The server shall support read and search, should support create and update. Talks about any other obligations that you're required to implement here. And then the search parameters as well. So it goes through each of those on your expectations. You'll also see some of this information also in the profiles. If we jump back to a profile like service request, other than the definition of all the elements, you'll also see things in here in the notes about search parameters, for example. These are the parameters. We expect the server shall implement those, should on this one, and the placer, filler, and patient may implement those search parameters. And then we've got examples of those as well. Anything else in the capability statement, Michael? Anything I should call out?
No, I think you covered it. And I think for those who haven't delved too deeply into this, those examples are gold. Like just being able to send a GET or a post or
Yeah.
something using the examples at the bottom of the profile.
Yep.
They're just gold if you're ever trying to play with this stuff.
Yeah. So we've got the sort of syntax, and then we've got an actual example, like here, service request with an ID using the includes. Yeah. Again, this, if you're at a connectathon and you're using Postman or something, this is the place to go and sort of use that as your basis, and then change the IDs and the values you want to use for doing these different types of searches. And that's on every profile that has search parameters, has the table of conformance, as well as then examples of using that. So yeah, absolutely, that is gold. While we're talking about examples, I will jump over to examples. This is also extremely valuable resource, is having examples for all of these things. So I will jump to one that's meaningful. Let's go to a service request. We've got an example service request example here for full blood count. If you have a look at this, this is the data that's being used in that. We've got an identifier. We've got the group identifier. We're saying it's active. It's an order. It's a laboratory procedure. The code is FBC, full blood count. We've got who the subject is, who the patient is, the encounter, authored, and that. And then you can actually look at this. If you want an XML view, you click on the XML view. If you want the JSON view, then you get this. And you can essentially copy and paste this and use this in your own system to test it with. This is all artificial data. There's nothing in here that you can't use as test data. These are also all in the HL7 AU test data repository. So we have all those in there. Angus.
Just a query question, really. Like back on the capability statements, like maybe click on the filler one.
Yeah.
Scroll down to the interactions down here. So just there. So so just so I'm clear, that this is saying performance server allow the placer to, for instance, read a communication request by ID.
Yeah.
What I'm just muddling through my mind, having now switched cancer to Telstra Health, is Telstra Health focuses everything through the task endpoint, right? Like the filler, everything through the task endpoint. They can get, but they're obviously through the task endpoint getting all the stuff, so they get the communication request by doing includes. And really it's part of their security model, right? They're kind of going, if you can't request a task that's owned by you, the lab, then you're not allowed to do it, right? And then that's how they drive their security model. But I'm wondering now, just an open question, does that mean they're not conformant because they're not letting someone just read practitioner, for instance, from the practitioner endpoint?
Yes. So let's go. So this is the which one are we in now? So this is the filler, right? So let's actually, why don't we go to the profile, because it's in a table there. So let's go to profiles and extensions. Let's go. We'll just pick service requests. You're saying they have to go through tasks. They can't go straight to service requests.
Yeah, they basically only expose the task endpoint and let you do all the includes.
So what we currently have here is we're saying eRequesting server shall support all the search parameters, right? The placer filler may, like whether you run that search or not, entirely up to you, right? But
the filler
if someone was doing conformance and they said, well, your server doesn't support it, but you could support it and say access denied, right? You could
Well, I mean, we could turn it on, like if you change context, if you're talking about, I don't know, you're a patient app or something, then maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe we're going to let you read the service request directly, right? It's just they're corralling people that way. It works, right? Like it.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, it doesn't mean they're not.
Well, I mean, the thing is, no one's doing conformance at the moment, right? So
no.
and it's up to the ecosystem you're running in to say, well, the server's going to do all of these things, right? But so you can implement eRequesting and say, yeah, you know what, we don't support these search parameters, but then it's not a fully open system that anyone can connect to and go, hey, you implement eRequesting, I expect you to support this search. So it's
So show me that page on the task resource then, so I can see it's
Yep,
like shall for there and then may for everyone else.
yeah. So on the task one, it's the same. This is in the capability statements, just a nice summary here. So
Still
the task has a
may,
lot
yeah.
more. You can see there's a lot
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
But the default we applied here for our conformance, because we basically said the server has to support the search, because if the server doesn't, a client can't use it, right?
But you could, like, looking at this, you could say, okay, I'm a conformance server. For the server conformance, I do support all these things, but for the filler, because it says may here, I don't let him do any of them. I'm being facetious, right? But
yeah.
And
There's
then
still
my
security
server
goes on top of this, right?
But I could
just
say
because
my
you support
server
the
is
search.
conformant. My server is conformant for a filler because this all says may, and I didn't let him do any of them because it was may, right? So he can't do anything, but I'm conformant.
Yeah.
That I mean,
I think
maybe it's
the
just a silly example, but I'm just trying to work out what this is telling me and what it
I
isn't
mean,
telling me.
in theory, these could all be shoulds, right? And then an ecosystem or downstream IG goes, you know what, for our e-requesting ecosystem, these are the shells and the others are, no, we're not implementing them. So maybe this is a step too far. Maybe these should be shoulds rather than shells. Right?
I guess having jumped camps, I can now see the problem between, you know, two independent people go at how they're going to do this, like say the filler. You know, this now I can see that I used to work with just Magentis, right? So it was like we just made it work and we did it a certain way. But then when I switched camps and now we're doing it against another one, of course, their mindset's completely different, right? So they've kind of in their mind see it a different way.
Yeah.
And then I can see there's no actual way, right? There's many ways. And then that's a problem. That's problematic. You know, we're also trying to lock things down because they presume you must do it this way. But then Sonic did it a different way because they didn't have that presumption. And now that makes interoperability hard because, you know, Telstra's making assumptions about what should do. I don't know an answer here. It's something I've realized from jumping between the two, that how a filler goes about doing his task is not defined. And we've purposely made it very open, right? But that openness,
I think that it's just the evolution of e-requesting, right? And the comment we made before about we don't have any security requirements in this at all at the moment, right?
Yeah, and that's
we've
what's
said, you know
driving
what,
it.
if you're not the owner, it's not assigned to you, you can't access it, right? And this is completely silent, doesn't say anything about that, right?
Yeah.
So
you're right. And
I think
it's that aspect that is driving the
evolution
difference
of putting over the top of going, well, I mean, you could support every single one of these search parameters and just say access denied. The server supports it, but you can't. I'm not going to let you run it. So,
I wasn't looking for an answer. It's the reality I live in, and I'm sort of caught between. Sonic does one way, Telstra expects it's a different way, and then you can't really go back to the spec. Go, no, it should be done this way because the specs open says you do it many ways, and then you're back to like just the argy-bargy of who's going to bend, right?
But I think that's the part of the, like I said, the evolution to R2, right? Is like, where are these pain points, right? And I think we've got there. One of the things to talk about is claiming, right, and those sorts of things, right? Well, if claiming is the only way you can come in, well, that kind of maybe a whole lot of these search parameters aren't relevant anymore, right? Or things like, so I think that's the bit that needs to come into R2 to further refine it. So these are the pain points. These are the things where we are going different ways. We need to standardize and work through that in an R2.
Definitely. It's just this fundamental difference. Like Andy and Magentis set up servers for the provider. Like there was a Sonic one, a Helios one. Therefore, he had no security requirements, right? Because it was like, you can only access Sonic stuff, so go crazy, access it however you like. But then at Telstra, they've gone with the approach of putting it all into one server, right? Helios Sonic stuff all in one server. Because they do that, they have to be really strict about do you control what Sonic's allowed to see as opposed to what Helios has to see? And the way they've done that is by focusing you through the task endpoint and insisting that you must do a query that says task owner is Sonic, and therefore you can go into Sonic stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying either one's
that's
wrong or right, but it's that now, because there's different ways. When Sonic suddenly switches their system and points to the Telstra, it's like it doesn't work, right? Because of all these limitations about security. So that's the problem, right?
well, and but Fire's in general pretty silent on security. So it would make no difference in the Magenta's API whether behind the scenes it was all in a single repository or in multiple repositories. If it's in a single repository, it's more work on our side then to manage the view of data. So when all of these things would be allowed, but when you do them, now that view has to be filtered from the broad general set of data available to the data which you can actually see, but it's not part of the API.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes for any
Yeah.
API, right? It's like, just because you queried it doesn't mean you get every result, right? It's got to filter them based on who you are and what you're
And
allowed to see.
We're not mandating in this that there is one or n fire servers behind the scene in this. There could be any option. It is complex doing managing broad open API access with being then able to filter the view. It's actually quite difficult, and they're really using interceptors to kind of do the magic is actually really hard.
Yeah, and that's what Telstra Health's done, is interceptors, right? And I guess the rosier side, even though probably done it the wrong way, is anything Telstra Health wants Sonic to do to apply to their security things are still going to be compatible with yours, because you're very open about what can be done, the way you can go about it. Telstra is more restricted, but Telstra Health's not making you do it a way that's not supported by your open way, right? But it's just unfortunate that we've gone, one and then the other. Like if we did the Telstra Health first one, we would be doing it one particular way that suited them, and then when we switched to you, it would have been just like, oh, you allow all sorts of ways, so it works, right? But because we did it the other way, it's creating tension. But I agree. I don't think it's a problem we're going to solve easily at all. But it is a problem once, now seeing the problems of two separate eRequesting servers running with the same clients trying to connect to it.
Yeah, I think you're going to find too, as there's more people implementing, that this isn't going to be sufficient, right? There's search parameters in here like that we haven't got, or we're going to need. There may be things in here that don't make sense to keep. We've got to pull out. So this definitely needs ongoing refinement. This is very much a release one that now when all these questions are going to come and go, well, hang on, this is causing me problems. We need to change this.
It's certainly no criticism. We've just climbed one mountain to see the next, right? And you can't see the next mountain until you climb the first.
The job is not done by any means, right? On this stuff. So
I think one of the critical things we're going to have to do for the next release is define a fire bundle, a transaction bundle. That's the most common question: is how do we do this stuff? You have to put it in a bundle.
Even that falls into the same problem of there's many different ways depending on how you're running your server.
I think that was the placeholder under this guidance for some of this. Down the bottom here, we had our implementation, because it's like these are some of the tricky questions, right? It's like transaction bundles, event tracking, we didn't actually talk about security here, but these are things that still need answers, right? And then to get that, we're all doing it the same way. That's where we need to go.
Yeah.
All right. I'm pretty much done here, other than just saying I think I was back on examples. There are examples for all of the eRequesting resources in here. Really useful to have a look at these, because if you don't know where to start, look at the examples and work backwards is great. I don't think there's much else in here other than downloads. This is where you download the packages to upload into your server. I've already gone through changelog, but I might, given we were already talking about R2, we can talk about that in a sec. But happy if anyone, is there anything else in the IG anyone wants to have a chat about while we're here? Well, I was going to talk a little bit about R2, which we've just been doing. But
Is it worth just reiterating that in going through this, even though we've gone through this balloting process, scrolling down to the end of the implementation guide at the bottom of the page, you can always stick in propose a change. And it's a good way of, I did one today, had second thoughts after it, but I did one anyway. Or anything that comes to mind, again, I'm implementing this, I've run across this issue, and then we can triage it and figure out collectively a way forward for some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we want, right? I think you don't have to just put up with what's in here and go, this is a pain. It doesn't work for me. I can't use it. Propose a change, bring it to a TDG. We can discuss it and then make changes, evolve this, because like we just said, it's not complete. It can evolve and needs to evolve. And the only way that happens is from community input by saying, this is what we need, this is what we want in it. And definitely do that proposed change for that. Well, I think that probably ties into just discussions about R2. So Jai, at the last TDG for last year, had this slide. Jai's not here today, but this is just reiterating what he discussed, that our transition to release 2, that it's moving from the Sparked accelerator just to HL7 Australia business as usual. So that just means it's just moving out of the accelerator, Sparked accelerator, but it's still a HL7, always was, always will be a HL7 Australia implementation guide. It's just moving out of the Sparked accelerator for that. So HL7 Australia leads the standard development for that going forward. And the Australian Digital Health Agency will provide some secretarial and development support for release 2 with that. I think then from the CDG side of things, AU eRequesting DI is going to be rolled into the AU. It used to be AU core data for interoperability. Now I think it's AU clinical data for interoperability. It's not just about core, it's about anything. There used to be separate data for interoperability documents for the different use cases. They're all going to come into one. eRequesting stuff will roll into that. Anything else that needs to go through the clinical design group can still go through that. And there'll be some further engagement early this year on planning for that transition just out of the accelerator into HL7 BAU. There will still be TDG meetings and there will still be ongoing development. So stay engaged, stay part of it. And that's where Andy set up a page for us here, which is the scope candidates page. So I'll put this in the chat. So anyone can contribute to this page. This is just a placeholder for the moment for things that we want to discuss for scope for release 2. So anyone can add to this page. The things you want to see in scope for release 2, jump on this page, put it in here. So we've got a few things here. I think we've had a couple of things added in here. I've just noted the things that we didn't do from CDG, just so they're there. It doesn't mean they're going to be in R2. It just means we can discuss what we need to focus on for release 2. Also put in here a list of all the things that have been deferred, JIRA items that were deferred as part of release 1 of eRequesting. So these are all the JIRA issues that we voted on, either in ballot for comment or ballot for working standard, and said consider for future use. There are things that we thought, oh yeah, you know what, we might, that's a valid request or a valid requirement, but it's not release 1. So there's a full list here of all of those considered for future use items. Again, so they can be there and discussed. Are there any of those that we want to pick up and look to move into release 2? So this page is here now to capture that. I don't know, Andy, did you have anything you wanted to add to this discussion?
No, other than to say that it's a good opportunity to, if you do have a pet R2 kind of what's next issue, then make sure you get it in here, because we'll certainly be going through this list and figuring out what's important to the community. I think, Michael, it'd be really good to have somewhere we could keep track of who is actually attempting to build out this IG and actually use it in anger. Because I know I've started to transition the Magentis IG across to be founded on the spec, and I'm running into a few issues. So I'd love to have others who, if you are doing it, could be part of that conversation.
Yeah, maybe I don't know, is it Zorp can start do something in Zorp to start with or something, or is a
Yeah, I'll start the thing in
yeah.
Zorp.
Yeah. And then, because yeah, I think that's it. That's exactly what we're going to find now too, is that we've developed release 1, we've done it, played with it in connectathons, but real world now, when you go to implement this in the real world, things are going to flush out, and that's the sorts of things. So if there's any you know of that can go on this, but also as they come up through R2, and that's why this needs to be an iterative process for ongoing releases. Whereas as things evolve, as people start using it, we're going to find things. There'll be big issues, there'll be little issues, but there'll be a whole heap. And yeah, our job is not done. There's lots to keep refining this and making it fit purpose. Other than that, just talking about the next meeting. Like I said, next meeting is still publication focused. We're just going to do look to approve the release for publication. There's really only a QA report review, a variant statement review. There's potentially time in that meeting, because hopefully we'll cover that all out pretty quickly, to potentially talk about some of the scope items. So anyone who's put anything on that page, we might use some of that time just to talk through what some of these things we think might be important are. We'll then take that approval to publication to the firework group meeting on the 11th of Feb, and then we should publish very shortly after that. So I expect us to have a published release 1 in Feb, so which was our target, and we're on it. So well done, everyone. Got the CDG, TDG design workshops in Hobart. Now that actually overlaps with that eRequesting TDG on the 26th of February. So I know a number of people will be at that. We've got a bit of time now. I don't know, do we want to make a decision today on whether we hold that meeting, or do we want to hold that over to 29th of January? How many people we got in today? About 20. So maybe we'll hold it over the next one, just in case people are on leave and the like, and a bit closer to the event, knowing who's going to be going and not. So we'll make a decision on whether we hold the 26th of February meeting on the next meeting on 29th of Jan. We'll make a decision on that one. Okay. Well, does anyone else have any other things they want to discuss? We've got a few minutes. No. Well, thank you, everyone. It's nice to be where we are. We're at a point getting very close to publication. Just tick the last few boxes and then we'll be there. So, and start looking at what's next. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you in the next meeting.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye.
Bye.